How's it going, everyone? It's your host Teju Shots here, and as you can see the thumbnail of this video, today we'll be going over Itachi versus Shisui, as both of them were held as the most talented shinobi in the Uchiha clan. Now to break it down, I'll be using Shisui at his peak, or the one right before Shisui met up with Danzo, and as for Itachi, I'll compare him to his Anbu days all the way to his Edo Tensei self. Before I begin, I'm going to set some ground rules first in this hypothetical battle. The first is this will be a battle to the death, the second there will be no outside help, and the third is that I'll be restricting Shisui's supposed Susanoo. Although Shisui's Susanoo was designed by Kishimoto, it only made an appearance in the games, and it wasn't shown nor mentioned in an anime, manga, or any of the light novels in Naruto. So unless shown otherwise, it will be headcanon to say that Shisui would have his Susanoo available at his disposal. Now the first matchup I'll be going over is Anbu Itachi before he attained his Mangekyo Sharingan versus Shisui. And before I go on with this battle, I'll be covering their battle capabilities, starting off with their arsenals. In Itachi's arsenal, we have his Genjutsu, Shadow Clones, his variety of fire release jutsus, and the little blade that he has. And that's it. Unlike Itachi and the Akatsuki, Anbu Itachi doesn't really have a lot to offer at his disposal and doesn't really possess all of his hacks abilities until later in the series. Now in Shisui's arsenal is a bit of an issue, as most of Shisui's feats weren't shown in the manga and were in fact only briefly mentioned, and Shisui only demonstrated on what he was capable of in the anime and briefly mentioned both in Itachi light novels. And when it comes to hypothetical battles, action speaks louder than words, but to give Shisui the benefit of the doubt, we'll include his techniques in the anime as well.
Hydro, that's not fair. Shisui
Now in Shisui's arsenal we have his famous body flicker, Genjutsu, summoning jutsu which he could summon his crows, fireball jutsu, his after images, Kotoamatsukami, and his tanto. Now as for speed feats, we weren't really shown a whole lot on how fast Anbu Itachi is for the exception of the anime, but even with that it really doesn't help. But the fact that Itachi was the captain of the Anbu when he was only 12 years old, he was able to kill off half the Uchiha clan and be incapable of keeping up with Shisui during their spar matches shows that Itachi is fast if he's able to keep up with Shisui. Speaking of Shisui, similar to Anbu Itachi, we weren't really shown how fast Shisui was, and we can only speculate with a few statements. For instance, during the Third Great Shinobi War, Shisui was known as Shisui the Body Flicker or Shisui the Teleporter if you want to go with the dub version, mainly because he was really skilled with his body flicker and was extraordinarily quick in combat. I'm not going to go into too much detail about his body flicker, but basically it's a jutsu that can make the user go immeasurable speeds depending on how close or far the distance is, and it's mainly used for long travel purposes for other shinobi, mainly because it's extremely difficult to use during combat. But Shisui was capable of coming over that difficulty and have mastered it to use during combat, which makes it a nightmare for the opposition. Also, it's important to note that the only other known people to have mastered the body flicker jutsu was Minato and the 4th Raikage. Of course, I'm not saying Shisui was as fast as them, but I'm saying that the fact those two are regarded as the two fastest shinobi up until that point should indicate that Shisui was fast as well. Also, when Shisui got his nickname, Shisui the Body Flicker, during the 4th Great Shinobi War, he was only around 7 to 8 years old during the war, as when Itachi first saw the battlefield during the war, he was only 4 years old at the time, and Shisui was 4 years older than Itachi, and Shisui died when he was 16 years old, which obviously Shisui has gone faster since then.
Behind you, Shisui lost to Danzo.
Now this is something that has gone out of hand and basically became a meme that Shisui is fodder because he lost to Danzo and had his eye ripped out. Of course I can't blame people for it because all the crappy filler we got in the anime and in the cutscenes in the games, and in the manga we weren't really shown what happened in Shisui's fight against Danzo, and we only got to see a few panels of the aftermath when Shisui had his eye stolen. But in the second Itachi's light novel, it was explained in detail that right before Danzo met up with Shisui, Danzo had secretly sent one of his subordinates from the Foundation and made him poison Shisui without him noticing, so he'd be severely weakened and couldn't move his body, so by the time he met up with Danzo, he had already come to the effects of the poison, which of course Danzo took that opportunity and ripped out his eye with ease, which goes to show that not even Danzo with his subordinates would dare to take on a healthy Shisui and knew the outcome had Shisui not been poisoned. Now when the fight starts, it's likely they'll either be in a stalemate or Shisui getting the upper hand, mainly because in the light novel it mentioned that every time both Itachi and Shisui sparred with each other, Shisui won I believe 2 out of 3 times and Itachi won 1 out of 3 times. But this of course is only because Shisui had more combat experience than Itachi, and again this is only a sparring session and not actual combat, so you could say that Shisui was holding back. Now without spending too much time on this, Shisui will probably be on par with Itachi Itachi at first, but will eventually get the upper hand because Shisui has more combat experience than Itachi, as Shisui is 4 years older than him and won more times in their spar matches than Itachi did. So Shisui will win around 7 or maybe 8 out of 10 times if you stretch it against Itachi. Now before people say I'm being biased here, let's go with Itachi with his Mangekyou Sharingan at his time in the Akatsuki versus Shisui. Now this Itachi is a whole lot different than in his Anbu days. This time he possesses all of his hacks abilities with his Mangekyou Sharingan, such as Tsukuyomi, Amaterasu, and of course his Susanoo. But the issue here is which Itachi should I pick from in this matchup. Should I pick Itachi from part 1, but he didn't really show many feats except for his hacks abilities, or the Itachi that fought against Sasuke, but he was already dying from his illness, but that was where we saw most of his feats from. But he was also holding back, so we don't really know how strong Itachi was without him holding back. But for the sake of a video and to make things fair, I'll be comparing a hypothetical healthy Itachi without his illness, and then I'll be using a sick version of Itachi when he was fighting against Sasuke. Now as for a healthy Itachi or Itachi without holding back, we weren't really shown many feats and we only see a few glimpses of him without holding back. For instance, during the 4th grade Shinobi War, Itachi was capable of keeping up with KCM Naruto, the same Naruto who dodged an attack from the 4th Raikage. But to be fair, Itachi likely wasn't keeping up with Naruto, but Naruto was keeping up with Itachi, meaning that Naruto wasn't using his full speed against Itachi, as Naruto was only trying to talk to Itachi about the situation with Sasuke while at the same time fighting him. But you could argue that Naruto was holding back. Regardless what you think that Itachi was keeping up with KCM Naruto or Naruto was holding back against Itachi, it doesn't really matter, as you'll see later in the video. Another thing to point out is that when Itachi broke free from Kabuto's control without holding back, Itachi was capable of using Amaterasu on Nagato, albeit Naruto destroyed Nagato's Chibaku Tensei and seemingly blitzed Nagato with his Totsuka blade. This of course was done by Itachi in his Edo Tensei state, which is weaker than if he was alive. Of course this was to assume if he was healthy. So if Shisui were to take on a healthy Itachi, he would absolutely get wrecked. Although Shisui will put up a decent fight, I don't see him or Itachi outperforming each other either in close combat or when colliding each other's fire style jutsus, as both of them did spar in the past, so they wouldn't have much trouble reading their movesets. And they both have similar speed, so I don't see them outspeeding each other. But the only downside is that Shisui wouldn't know that Itachi would have Amaterasu or Tsukuyomi at his disposal and could have easily been caught off guard if Itachi used either of them. Now I don't see Itachi nailing the Amaterasu on Shisui, as Shisui could arguably dodge the Amaterasu with his body flicker, but of course depends on how close Shisui is from the attack. For example, if Shisui was as close as the 4th Raikage was when Sasuke used Amaterasu against him during the 5 Kage summit, Shisui will likely get hit, as Shisui isn't as fast as the 4th Raikage, and that will be the end of that. But if Shisui was about double the distance than the Raikage was, then I could see Shisui dodging the Amaterasu, or he could use his after images to confuse Itachi, as he couldn't tell them apart. But the big question is, what the hell is Shisui going to do with Itachi's Tsukuyomi? Shisui wouldn't know what Tsukuyomi is, nor know when it's coming until it's already too late, and will be trapped in the Genjutsu world for about 3 days, or 1 second in real life, and after suffering from all the trauma he went through, he'll be completely drained to get back up, and Itachi could just finish him off. We did see Sasuke break out of Tsukuyomi during his fight against Itachi, but you could argue that Itachi led him, but you could make a case otherwise. There's also the Tsukuyomi that Itachi used on Izumi in the light novels, that he made her live through her entire life in 1/1,000,000th of a second and dying afterward, and he only did that special treatment to Izumi as Itachi really cared for her, and by killing her first, he would have no hesitation on killing the rest of his clan. But back to the main point, Shisui gets hit by Itachi's Tsukuyomi, there isn't anything you'd argue with or against that Shisui could break out of the Genjutsu. But if you want to give the benefit of the doubt that there's no way that Shisui could break out of the Tsukuyomi, as I believe it's about a second that Shisui loses.
But Hydro, what about Shisui's Kotoamatsukami?
Ah yes, Shisui's most famous ace, the Kotoamatsukami. Ao, someone who crossed paths with Shisui in the past, stated that Kotoamatsukami makes the user go through phantom experiences and manipulates them without the person knowing, and can also change a person's memory or thought by merely looking into their eyes. As Shisui was about to use it on Fuguki, Itachi and Sasuke's father, to change his mind and prevent the Uchiha coup d'etat from happening. Even Mr. Tsukuyomi himself stated that Shisui's Kotoamatsukami is the ultimate Genjutsu. Now switching over to Obito, someone who could place the QB under his control with a Sharingan, wanted to get his hands on Shisui's eye.
Itachi could just not look into his eyes.
In the Itachi's light novel, Shisui stated that he only needs to see a glimpse of a person's eyes and that person will already be under his control, which Shisui could just look into Itachi's eyes for a second and he'll already be under his Genjutsu, and wouldn't matter if Itachi didn't look into his eyes. Now what can Shisui do against Itachi with Kotoamatsukami during their battle? Not much really, if anything at all. Kotoamatsukami is certainly an overpowered Genjutsu in terms of controlling people long term, but it's kind of useless in battle depending how you look at it. Some say Shisui could just use Kotoamatsukami to make Itachi kill himself, which I don't know if that'll work or not, and others say if that does happen, it'll probably go like this. Shisui, I never thought the day would come when we cross blades. I'm feeling so sad. I almost just want to kill my... Wait a minute. On a serious note, a fair argument I see often is that Shisui's Kotoamatsukami works instantly, as when Itachi first used his Kotoamatsukami on himself to break free from Kabuto's control, it immediately worked, and after he turned on Nagato and then went straight after Kabuto afterward, even though the entire time he knew he was under Kotoamatsukami, as he still had to follow the command of the Genjutsu. Also, when Sasuke told Itachi to stop running away from him, Itachi replied that he wasn't and said he has something to do because he was under Kotoamatsukami to protect Konoha, and in order for him to do that, he has to defeat Kabuto and undo the Edo Tensei. Of course, in Itachi's case, the reason why Kotoamatsukami worked instantly is because Itachi had already set it up beforehand, and if Shisui wanted to use it on Itachi, he will need to charge it up a second or two longer before he uses it. Also, people would like to argue if it worked instantly, then why he didn't use it on Danzo to get his eye back, which is a fair argument, but there's a few reasons why he didn't do that. As one, Shisui was poisoned and probably couldn't pull himself to do it, and even if he used it on Danzo, the root members would have just attacked him. Another one is that Shisui couldn't probably use it with the eye that he had, probably because he already programmed it to use it on Fuguki, or maybe he had already used it beforehand on someone else and couldn't use it. As Itachi said to both Bee and Naruto, on the reason why he didn't use Kotoamatsukami on Sasuke is because he had to wait a full 10 years for him to use it. There's a few more I could add on, but these are like the main reasons why he didn't use it on Danzo, probably. Also, in the second Itachi's light novel, before Itachi was about to slaughter his clan, Itachi stated that Shisui would have been totally against the idea of slaughtering their clan, and then after, the narrator quoted, maybe it was fortunate that they parted that day as friends, and it may indicate had the two of them fought, it probably would have been a close fight, and at this point, Itachi had already unlocked the Mangekyo Sharingan with Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi. But take that statement as a grain of salt, as the wording of it is very vague and isn't clarified in what exactly means, and could likely be taken out of context because of the wording of it. In the games, we do see Kotoamatsukami being used where the user is trapped in a Genjutsu world similar to Itachi's Tsukuyomi, but again, that only happened in games. It was never shown nor mentioned such a feat in any of the canon material. Now, going back to the battle, if Shisui's Kotoamatsukami can be used instantly, or he has to charge it up for a few seconds and uses it on Itachi, it'd be difficult to argue that Itachi could just break free from it, but if it isn't, it has to take a longer time to take effect. As I said previously, it will be completely useless in battle and he will lose. On top of that, what the hell is Shisui going to do against Itachi Susanoo? Shisui doesn't have anything that can crack, let alone break Itachi Susanoo, as Itachi has both the Yanamir and the Tosca blade to protect himself. Also, unless Itachi catches Shisui off guard and had dust surrounding him similar to Nagato, I don't think Itachi could hit Shisui with the Tosca blade, as I believe Shisui would be too fast for him to catch him, but it would only be a matter of time before he loses, and that of course if Shisui even gets to this point, which I doubt. Now, to wrap it up, I can see them in a stalemate in terms of close combat or fire style jutsus, and unless Shisui uses his after images to confuse Itachi, he will ultimately get hit by Itachi Tsukuyomi, and I don't see Shisui breaking out Itachi Tsukuyomi, but there isn't anything against saying otherwise, nor showing a feat that he could or couldn't break out of Tsukuyomi. And again, unless Shisui's Kotoamatsukami can be used instantaneously, then as I said before, it's completely useless in battle, and to top it off, there is nothing that Shisui can do to counter Itachi Susanoo, and it will be a wrap from there. So Itachi wins about 8, maybe 9 out of 10 times, again depending on what Kotoamatsukami can do, and if not, Itachi could win 10 out of 10 times. Even with his illness, he will still likely win against Shisui, regardless of the handicap he would have, but I do see him having a harder time with him than he would if he was healthy. But he will still keep up with Shisui with no issues, as Itachi was capable of activating his Susanoo right before Sasuke's Kidding was about to hit him, which you could easily argue that Itachi can react to lightning speed. And you could debate whether or not Itachi uses skeleton or his full armor Susanoo, but in this argument it doesn't really matter, as Shisui doesn't have anything to damage his Susanoo anyway, and just copy everything I said previously for a healthy Itachi and paste it here, but not as a massive stomp that he would have if he was healthy, because he would have less stamina than he did before, but enough to win more times than Shisui out of 10. Now for Edo Tensei Itachi versus Shisui, to keep it brief, Itachi massively stomps Shisui. That is not even funny, and the only thing that could save Shisui if his Kotoamatsukami can work or not. Also, I completely forgot to mention about Itachi's Izunagi. That should go more in favor in Itachi winning against Shisui, but I imagine it will be extremely difficult for him to use it on Shisui, and I don't see Itachi using it as he has other options on the table and he'll only use it as a last resort. That's it for today's video. If you like the sort of content I post, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.